Prince Harry thought he knew his wife's story. The actress who charmed him on a blind date, the humanitarian who shared his values, the woman who understood him in ways no one else ever had. For years, he defended that story against critics, tabloids, and even his own family. He stood by Meghan through every scandal, every accusation, every whispered rumor, because he believed he knew the truth. But what Harry didn't know, what he's only now discovering, is that the story he's been defending wasn't the whole truth. It wasn't even close. And the discovery of what really happened inside Soho House, the exclusive private club where Meghan spent years before they met, has left him absolutely stunned. Not angry, not defensive, stunned. Because the revelations aren't coming from tabloids or palace leaks. They're coming from documents, from witnesses, from people who were there, from a world Meghan told him didn't matter anymore. And what Harry's learning is forcing him to question everything he thought he knew about how their relationship started, who was really pulling the strings, and whether the blind date that changed his life was ever really blind at all. It started with something small, a photograph. Harry was going through old files, personal documents from the years before he met Meghan, when he stumbled across a photo from a charity event in 2013, 3 years before their supposed blind date. And there, in the background of a group shot, standing at a Soho House event in London, was Meghan. Harry stared at the photo for a long time. At first, he thought maybe he was mistaken. Maybe it just looked like her, but he zoomed in on his phone, enlarging the image until the face became unmistakable. Same smile, same hair, same distinctive features. It was definitely Meghan. And she wasn't just passing through the frame, she was clearly engaged at the event, glass in hand, speaking with someone Harry didn't recognize. The metadata on the photo confirmed what his gut already knew. June 2013, London, Soho House, Dean Street. 3 full years before Meghan claimed she'd first visited England. Harry felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not anger, not yet, just confusion. Because Meghan had been so specific in her stories about England. She'd told Oprah, told interviewers, told him privately that everything about London was a discovery, that she'd never experienced British culture before meeting him, that he'd introduced her to the city, to the traditions, to the entire world she'd eventually join. But the photograph proved that was wrong. She'd been there before, at an exclusive members-only club, at an event Harry himself might have attended if his schedule had allowed, in the exact circles where she'd later claimed to have never traveled. Harry cross-referenced the date with Meghan's public statements, found the interview where she'd said, "I'd never been to the UK before I met Harry. Everything was new." Found another where she described her first trip to London as magical because Harry was showing her everything. Found a third where she'd claimed she'd never understood British culture until she'd fallen in love with someone who embodied it. Every statement, now sitting next to photographic proof that she'd been in London years earlier, felt like a small deception. Maybe innocent, maybe just simplified storytelling for public consumption. But Harry couldn't shake the feeling that if she'd lied about something this verifiable, what else hadn't been entirely truthful? He stared at the photo for a long time that day. Meghan had always told him she'd never been to London before they met, that everything about England was new to her, that she fell in love with the city through his eyes. But the photo didn't lie, the date stamp didn't lie, and the location, Soho House, London, started to raise questions Harry had never thought to ask before. He called Marcus Anderson, his wife's closest friend, the man who'd supposedly arranged their blind date, the man Harry had trusted completely. And he asked a simple question. When did Meghan first visit Soho House, London? Marcus hesitated, just a beat, but Harry heard it. The pause that meant the answer wasn't simple. Eventually, Marcus said what Harry already suspected. Meghan had been coming to Soho House, London for years, long before Harry, long before the blind date, long before she ever claimed to have set foot in England. That single admission opened a door Harry had kept locked for years. And what he found on the other side left him reeling. Because if Meghan had lied about something that small, that verifiable, what else hadn't she told him? He stared at the photo for a long time that day. Meghan had always told him she'd never been to London before they met, that everything about England was new to her, that she fell in love with the city through his eyes. But the photo didn't lie. The date stamp didn't lie, and the location, Soho House, London, started to raise questions Harry had never thought to ask before. He called Marcus Anderson, his wife's closest friend, the man who'd supposedly arranged their blind date, the man Harry had trusted completely. And he asked a simple question: when did Meghan first visit Soho House, London? Marcus hesitated, just a beat, but Harry heard it. The pause that meant the answer wasn't simple. Eventually, Marcus said what Harry already suspected. Meghan had been coming to Soho House, London for years, long before Harry, long before the blind date, long before she ever claimed to have set foot in England. That single admission opened a door Harry had kept locked for years. And what he found on the other side left him reeling, because if Meghan had lied about something that small, that verifiable, what else hadn't she told him? Harry started digging. Not publicly, not through the palace, but quietly, privately, through people he trusted outside the royal bubble. And what he discovered about Soho House wasn't just that Meghan had been a member, it was how she'd been a member. According to insiders, Meghan never paid for her Soho House membership. Not in Toronto, not in London, not in New York or Los Angeles. Every membership, across multiple cities, each costing thousands of dollars annually, was comped, complimentary, free. But Soho House doesn't hand out free memberships to struggling actresses. They're reserved for people who bring value, people who attract the right crowd, people who serve a purpose beyond simply being members. Harry asked the question that was tearing him apart. What value did Meghan provide to justify years of free access to the world's most exclusive clubs? The answer he got made his blood run cold. Meghan was what insiders called a facilitator, someone who made things happen at events, someone who knew how to keep powerful people comfortable, someone who could arrange what guests needed, no questions asked. She wasn't just attending parties, she was organizing them, managing them, making sure the right people met the right people, making sure certain substances were available when requested, making sure nothing that happened behind Soho House's closed doors ever made it into the press. Harry had always known Marcus Anderson held power at Soho House, but he'd never understood that Meghan had been part of that operation, that her entire social rise, the circles she moved through, the connections she made, weren't accidental. They were transactional. She provided access, discretion, and services. In exchange, she got access to a world most people could never touch. A world where billionaires, actors, and even royals gathered without scrutiny. A world that positioned her perfectly to meet a prince. The revelation that destroyed Harry's understanding of his own love story came from a guest list, a private event at Soho House, Toronto in 2016. The summer he and Meghan supposedly met for the first time on that famous blind date. Harry obtained the list through a contact who'd worked the event. And there, on a gathering that took place 2 months before their official meeting, were two names that made Harry's world collapse: Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. They'd been at the same event, the same private Soho House party, weeks before the blind date that supposedly introduced them. Harry's hands shook as he read the list again and again. Had they met that night? Had they spoken? Had the entire blind date story been a fabrication to hide a connection that already existed? He confronted Meghan, and according to sources close to the conversation, her response wasn't denial. It was deflection. She claimed she didn't remember, that it was a big event, that she might have been there but didn't recall seeing him, that it didn't matter because their real connection happened later. But Harry knew it mattered, because if they'd met before, if there'd been contact before the supposed blind date, then everything about their origin story was a performance. The chance encounter, the instant chemistry, the fairy tale narrative they'd sold to the world. All of it called into question by a single guest list that proved they'd been in the same room, at the same exclusive event, before anyone was supposed to know they'd ever crossed paths. And if that was a lie, what else had been carefully constructed? Harry's investigation led him to Ron Burkle, the billionaire whose name kept appearing in files connected to Soho House, to Meghan's travel, to events she attended during the years before they met. Burkle was a member of Soho House's inner circle, a man with connections to Epstein's network, a man who owned yachts where young women were allegedly introduced to powerful men, a man whose financial interests included media, politics, and influence, and according to sources Harry consulted, a man who'd taken interest in Meghan years before she became a duchess. Harry learned that Burkle had funded trips for Meghan, covered expenses for events she couldn't have afforded otherwise, provided access to circles where a cable TV actress had no business being present. And while there's no evidence of anything inappropriate, the pattern was clear. Meghan's lifestyle in the years before Harry didn't match her income. Designer clothes, international travel, access to galas and yacht parties that cost more to attend than she made in a year. Someone was funding her rise, and that someone wasn't doing it out of charity. They were doing it because Meghan provided something in return. Harry asked the question he dreaded most: was I a target? Was I identified, studied, and approached as part of a plan that started long before I ever thought I'd met my future wife? The people he consulted didn't give him a direct answer, but their silence said enough. In elite circles, princes aren't accidents, they're opportunities. And if someone with the right connections wanted to position a woman to meet a prince, Soho House was exactly where they'd start. The network was already in place. Marcus Anderson had access to Harry's social circle. Meghan had been trained, polished, and positioned in the right rooms at the right times. All it would take was one introduction, one carefully orchestrated evening, one blind date that wasn't blind at all. The most devastating discovery came from Harry's own security team. Not the palace's security, his private security, the team he'd hired after leaving royal life. They'd been conducting routine background work when they uncovered something the palace had buried years ago. During Meghan's initial vetting before the wedding, royal security had flagged her Soho House connections. They'd documented her comped memberships. They'd noted her relationship with Marcus Anderson and his proximity to questionable networks. They'd identified Ron Burkle's financial support and raised concerns about his connections. They'd compiled a report that recommended further investigation before proceeding with the marriage. And that report had been classified, sealed, buried by senior palace officials who decided that avoiding accusations of racism was more important than investigating potential security concerns. Harry had never seen the report. He'd been told the vetting came back clean, that there was nothing to worry about, that Meghan's background was thoroughly checked and cleared. But the report his security team uncovered told a different story. It detailed concerns about Meghan's financial situation. It questioned how she maintained a lifestyle far beyond her means. It noted her presence at events connected to people the palace would never want associated with the royal family. It specifically mentioned Marcus Anderson as a person of interest whose influence over Meghan warranted closer examination. And it recommended delaying the wedding until these matters could be properly investigated. The recommendation had been ignored, the concerns had been dismissed, and Harry had married Meghan without ever knowing that his own family's security apparatus had warned against it. The betrayal he felt wasn't directed at Meghan, not yet. It was directed at the institution that had lied to him, at the advisors who'd hidden the truth, at his father and brother who'd known there were questions and chose not to share them. Because if Harry had seen that report, if he'd known what security had found, he would have asked Meghan directly. And maybe, just maybe, she would have told him the truth before vows were exchanged. But the question Harry couldn't escape was whether Meghan would have told him the truth even if he'd asked. Because the more he learned about her time at Soho House, the more he realized how good she was at managing narratives, at presenting different versions of herself to different audiences, at telling people exactly what they needed to hear while keeping the full truth carefully hidden. Sources say Harry found text messages, old correspondences between Meghan and Marcus Anderson from before they were officially dating, messages that referenced Harry by name, that discussed his schedule, that mentioned his vulnerabilities, his relationship patterns, his emotional needs. Messages that read less like casual conversation between friends and more like strategic planning. In one exchange, Meghan allegedly wrote about understanding Harry's mother wound, about knowing that he needed someone who could make him feel safe and understood, about recognizing that his frustration with palace life made him vulnerable to someone offering escape. The text read like psychology, like someone studying a target rather than falling for a person. And Marcus's responses, according to sources, encouraged that approach, reminded Meghan that Harry was lonely, that he wanted out of his royal role, that he needed someone strong enough to help him break free. The messages stopped before their first official date, as if both Meghan and Marcus knew that once the relationship became public, written strategies had to disappear. But the early exchanges told Harry everything he needed to know. His romance, the connection he thought was organic and real, had been analyzed and engineered before it ever began. Meghan hadn't just met him and fallen in love. She'd studied him, understood his weaknesses, and positioned herself as exactly what he needed. And Marcus Anderson had helped every step of the way. The revelation that broke Harry completely came from a former Soho House employee, someone who'd worked events in Toronto during the years Meghan was a member. This employee, speaking anonymously to Harry's investigator, described a conversation they'd overheard in early 2016, months before Meghan and Harry's supposed first meeting. Meghan was at a private event, speaking with Marcus Anderson and another man the employee didn't recognize, but described as wealthy and connected, and Meghan said something the employee never forgot. She said she was going to marry Prince Harry, not hoped to meet him, not dreamed of dating him, said she was going to marry him in early 2016, before they'd officially met, before the blind date, before any public indication they'd ever crossed paths. She said it with certainty, like someone discussing a business plan rather than a romantic possibility. And Marcus Anderson, according to the employee, didn't laugh or dismiss it. He nodded, like it was already in motion. The employee didn't think much of it at the time. People say crazy things at private parties. Actresses have delusions about princes. But when Meghan and Harry's engagement was announced less than 2 years later, the employee remembered that conversation. And now, sharing it with Harry's investigator, they confirmed what Harry had been suspecting. His relationship wasn't fate. It was a plan, a coordinated effort by people who saw him not as a person, but as an opportunity. And Meghan had been positioned, prepared, and coached to become exactly what he needed so she could get exactly what she wanted. Harry sat with this information for days, not speaking, not confronting, just processing the possibility that the most important relationship of his life had been built on something other than love, that the woman he'd left his family for, the woman he'd abandoned his country for, might have been playing a role from the very beginning. Harry's confrontation with Marcus Anderson was quiet. No shouting, no accusations, just questions. And Marcus, according to sources, didn't deny the essentials. He admitted that he'd introduced Meghan and Harry with intention, that he'd known they'd be a good match, that he'd helped facilitate their connection because he believed they'd make each other happy. But when Harry pressed about the timing, about whether Meghan had known about him before the blind date, about whether their meeting was truly chance, Marcus became evasive. He said that everyone in their circles knew who everyone else was, that it was impossible to be in London's elite social scene without being aware of the royals, that Meghan might have seen Harry at events, might have known his schedule, might have understood his world before they formally met. But he insisted that didn't mean she was scheming. It just meant she was informed. Harry asked the question that had been eating at him. Did Meghan target me? Was I selected? Marcus's answer was careful. He said that Meghan admired Harry long before they met, that she thought they'd be compatible, that she hoped one day they might cross paths. But he stopped short of admitting there was a plan. He stopped short of confirming that Meghan had been positioned intentionally. And in that careful space between admission and denial, Harry found his answer. Because if there was nothing to hide, Marcus would have denied it outright. The fact that he didn't, the fact that he chose his words so carefully, told Harry everything he needed to know. The blind date wasn't blind. The chance encounter wasn't chance. And the woman he loved had walked into his life with far more knowledge and intention than she'd ever admitted. The personal crisis this created for Harry is, according to insiders, unlike anything he's experienced before. Because this isn't about tabloids lying or the palace being controlling. This is about whether the foundation of his marriage was built on truth or manipulation. Whether Meghan fell in love with him or simply executed a plan. Whether the escape from royal life that she encouraged was his choice or her objective all along. Sources say Harry has withdrawn, not from Meghan, not yet, but into himself, processing, questioning, trying to reconcile the woman he loves with the evidence that she wasn't entirely honest about how they met or who she was before they met. He's asked her directly about the vision board, the one allegedly featuring his photo years before they met. She's denied it existed, called it a malicious rumor, but Harry has spoken to people who claim they saw it, and he doesn't know who to believe. He's asked her about the comped Soho House memberships. She's explained them as industry courtesy, networking perks, nothing unusual for someone in her position. But Harry knows what Soho House memberships cost. He knows they're not given away casually, and he can't shake the feeling that there's more to the story than she's sharing. He's asked her about Marcus Anderson, about the nature of their relationship, about whether Marcus was managing her rise the way palace officials have suggested. And Meghan's answer, according to sources, was defensive. She accused Harry of listening to people who want to destroy her, of believing palace propaganda designed to make him doubt her, of choosing his family's lies over her truth. And that response, that deflection, only deepened Harry's doubts. Because if the accusations were truly baseless, why not address them directly? Why not provide evidence that disproves them? Why attack the questioner instead of answering the questions? The crisis Harry faces isn't just personal, it's existential. Because everything he's done in the past 5 years, leaving the royal family, moving to California, cutting off his brother, estranging himself from his father, was based on supporting Meghan, on believing her narrative, on trusting that she was the victim of a racist institution and a cruel press. But if Meghan wasn't entirely honest about her past, if she positioned herself to meet him rather than meeting him by chance, if the people he cut off were actually trying to protect him from something he refused to see, then what does that mean? It means he sacrificed his family for a lie. It means he abandoned his duty based on a version of events that wasn't complete. It means the firm ground he thought he was standing on was built on omissions and carefully managed truths. Friends say Harry hasn't reached a conclusion yet. He's still in the discovery phase, still investigating, still trying to understand what's real and what was performance. But the process itself has changed him. The man who once defended Meghan without question now questions everything. The prince who trusted his wife implicitly now second-guesses her explanations. The husband who believed their love story was destiny now wonders if it was simply good planning. And that doubt, once planted, is almost impossible to kill. Because Harry has seen the guest lists, he's read the security reports, he's spoken to people who were there during Meghan's Soho House days. And while none of it proves deliberate deception, all of it suggests that the story Meghan told him about who she was and how they met wasn't the whole truth. And for Harry, who spent years defending that truth against critics, the realization that it might have been incomplete is devastating. What happens next, sources say, depends entirely on what Meghan does. If she comes clean, if she admits that yes, she knew of Harry before they met, yes, she hoped to catch his attention, yes, she asked Marcus to arrange an introduction, but insists that real love developed after that tactical beginning, continues to insist that everything was chance and fate and organic connection, while Harry holds evidence suggesting otherwise, the gap between them will widen, because Harry can forgive being targeted. He can understand that someone ambitious might have positioned herself to meet a prince. What he can't forgive is being lied to, being told a fairy tale while living in something closer to a business arrangement, being asked to sacrifice everything for a relationship that wasn't what he thought it was. Insiders say the conversations in Montecito have become tense, not shouting matches, but careful, measured discussions where every word is weighed, where Harry asks questions and Meghan provides answers that don't quite satisfy, where both of them know that something fundamental has shifted, but neither is ready to say it out loud. The fairy tale is cracking. And all it took was the truth about Soho House, about Marcus Anderson, about comped memberships and strategic positioning, and a blind date that maybe wasn't so blind after all. The tragedy of Harry's discovery isn't that Meghan might have positioned herself to meet him. In elite circles, strategic networking is normal. People build connections intentionally. That's how power works. The tragedy is that Harry was never told. He was presented with a fairy tale, rescued damsel meets lonely prince, when the reality was far more calculated. He was asked to believe in destiny when what actually happened was planning. And now, discovering the gap between what he was told and what actually happened, he's forced to question everything. Not just about Meghan, about himself, about his judgment, about whether he was manipulated or simply saw what he wanted to see. Sources say Harry has asked one question repeatedly: did she ever really love me? Or was I always just the role she was playing? And that question, the fact that he's even asking it, shows how fundamentally the Soho House revelations have shaken him. Because a man secure in his marriage doesn't ask if his wife's love is real. A man confident in his choices doesn't question whether he was targeted. The fact that Harry is asking these questions means the foundation has cracked. And once a foundation cracks, it's only a matter of time before the structure built on top of it starts to crumble. Harry thought he knew his wife. He thought he knew their story. He thought he understood how they'd met and why they'd fallen in love and what they were building together. But the Soho House secrets have revealed something different. A world where memberships are currency, where connections are transactions, where young women are positioned to meet powerful men as part of operations most people never see. A world where Meghan wasn't just a struggling actress who got lucky, she was a participant, someone who understood how the game worked and played it well enough to land a prince. And Harry, discovering this years into a marriage he sacrificed everything to protect, is left stunned. Not because he's naive, but because he never thought the woman he loved would keep something this important hidden. The revelations haven't ended the marriage, not yet, but they've ended Harry's certainty. And in a relationship built on trust, certainty is everything. Without it, love becomes questionable, sacrifice becomes regrettable, and the future becomes uncertain. Harry is stunned because he thought he'd escaped the palace's lies when he left with Meghan. But what he's discovering is that he might have just traded one set of carefully managed truths for another. The palace lied to him about Meghan's vetting, but Meghan, it seems, wasn't entirely truthful about her past either. And caught between two versions of truth, both incomplete, both self-serving, Harry is left wondering if he ever really knew the whole story at all. The Soho House secrets haven't destroyed Prince Harry, but they've destroyed his certainty. And for a man who gave up everything based on being certain he was making the right choice, that loss might be the most devastating revelation of all.